With the way Tinubu's administration is clamping down on free speech and arresting journalists, one can comfortably say that the ghost of General Sani Abacha of the 90s is upon Nigeria. That's why Nigerians must unite to resist like they resisted during Abacha's regime. In the 90s, Nigerians formed the National Democratic Coalition, NADECO for short, to fight the military regime. And considering the fact that Tinubu was part of NADECO at the time, as a matter of fact, he was forced to go on exile because of Abacha's dictatorship. One wonders why he is now doing the same thing that he fought against in the 90s, or was all of it a hoax? They've been trying hard to criminalize protest in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, more than 2,000 people remain in detention across Nigeria. Their crimes for simply trooping out in their numbers to protest during the hunger protest. NADECO and other human rights organizations in the 90s protested against the military regime of General Sani Abacha. Why can't Nigerians protest today? Even if they are peaceful, like it happened yesterday, the Shiites were actually on their second day of march for the commemoration of one of their leaders, and all of a sudden, the police started firing tear gas at them. Not just tear gas, also live bullets, which eventually led to casualties on both sides. Yes, they are saying that the organization is banned in Nigeria. As a result, they are not allowed to hold protests. Nigerian citizens reserve the right to peaceful protests, whether they belong to a banned organization or not. Anyway, it was an unnecessary confrontation from the police, considering that the first day of the march was largely peaceful. They didn't need to clamp down on them hard. The way Nigerian security agents arrested and tortured a Nigerian journalist who they claim is behind this handle on X has been generating a lot of backlash from Nigerians, notably from the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. The journalist was handcuffed and kept in solitary confinement for several days without food. When fellow journalists discovered that he was indeed in their captivity, they now hurriedly gave him an impossible administrative bail. Even if a journalist publishes something that is considered libelous, he still doesn't deserve to be tortured and kept in solitary confinement for several days. Of course, he wasn't arrested for libel or defamation. He was arrested because of the many leaks he has published in the past. Obviously, they tortured him to force him to name his sources, which he didn't need to know. Journalists don't need to know their sources. Leakers and whistleblowers approach them because they are working in the national interest. Also, leakers at that level, at the presidency, at the police headquarters, the army, everywhere, they understand the routine. They need to pass the information anonymously to protect themselves, because in this case that it has happened, they have control of all his social media handles, they seized all his gadgets. They must be going through all of them to see who they can identify to expand their investigation. So leakers at that level understand that they must protect their identity. They know the implications. These people will do away with them without anyone hearing about it. So they shouldn't be concerned about the journalist who published the leaks. He is just a whistleblower doing his job in the national interest. Who they should be concerned about are people within them, within the presidency, within the police, inside the system that are working in the national interest, because all these leaks show that Nigerian leaders are working for their own interest, not national interest. This is why these people are leaking the information to inform Nigerians, hey, this is what is going on, save the situation before it is too late. Now, let's see what Atiku Abubakar said while reacting to the clampdown by the Tinubu administration on journalists and free speech. In a statement he released through his media aide, Frank Shoaibu, he said, quote, "The dangerous trend of enforced disappearances has become a national embarrassment for a country which claims to be practicing democracy. On May 1st, 2024, Daniel Ojukwu of the Foundation for Investigative Journalism went missing and was presumed abducted by kidnappers until he was later discovered to be in police custody on the orders of IGP Kayode Egbetokun. Ojukwu's crime was that he exposed the corruption of a government official who currently serves in Tinubu's administration. On July 23rd, the DSS arrested one Aliyu Sanisu in Sama Road of Sokoto, the state capital, for printing and distributing materials ahead of the End Bad Governance protest. Even the arrest and release of former BBC Pidgin editor and current West Africa regional editor of The Conversation, Adejuwon Soyinka, clearly shows a pattern whose objective is to intimidate journalists for speaking the truth to this government. Now, the police have arrested Bristol Tamunobiefre, who owns the PDOM Nigeria blog on X, formerly Twitter. After detaining him for over 2 weeks, he was granted an administrative bail which will be impossible to meet. This is despite the fact that the appeal court in the case of EFCC vs. MN Ubo 2022 held that administrative bail is illegal. Bristol should therefore be arraigned in court immediately or released, unquote. You see, there are two main reasons dictators clamp down on journalists and free speech. It has happened under military regimes in the past in Nigeria. They always clamp down on journalists because journalists are like whistleblowers. The real whistleblowers who are within the government that get information to reveal to the journalists, they will now go ahead to publish them. Remember Delegiwa in the late 80s during IBB's regime, they used a letter bomb on him. So it's not far-fetched. And a dictator under a civilian regime is much more dangerous than a dictator under a military regime. The reason is simple. In a military regime, they don't rule by the constitution. They toss it right after they take power. They rule by decrees, and as a result, they always clamp down on human rights and free speech. This is why many countries always sanction them. Nearly all the military regimes in the world are sanctioned by the West and other countries. And most of the sanctions are always economic sanctions, which eventually cause massive suffering for the people. But under a civilian regime, whether the person is a sit-tight ruler who has ruled for many years and decades, the West and other countries will never sanction the regime. This is the problem. So the people will be suffering in silence. No one will be coming to their help because the world, the so-called West, wants to protect a democratic regime. Whether the regime is worse than a military regime, they don't just care. All they care about is that no country is being led by a military person. So this is the problem. Now, the first reason dictators clamp down on journalists and free speech is because they are doing something bad. They are involved in corruption and stealing. It's natural. If you are doing something good, there's nothing to hide. After all, people wouldn't react in a negative way if they see what you are doing. There will be practically nothing to leak. What are you going to leak? Are you going to leak projects that will benefit the people? They will laugh at you. So instead of doing all the right things that will prevent leakers and whistleblowers from leaking anything, they rather get involved in corruption and enriching themselves. And once they are doing that, they wouldn't want people to know about it, because if they know about it, it will provoke reaction. Which brings us to number 2 reason why they clamp down on journalists and free speech. The reason is because they are afraid. They are simply afraid of the consequence. Although Nigerians don't react to anything, but the people involved in illegal activities always fight with their conscience. They know that when people see a leak that shows, for instance, billions of naira being siphoned abroad by politicians, it might cause a reaction from some quarters. And that reaction might lead to somewhere that is unpredictable. So they try hard to do all their illegalities while shielding themselves, preventing people from hearing about it so as not to provoke a reaction, which might be violent. And once a regime goes down this path, know that there is problem ahead, just like during the 90s under Abacha. And the worst part is that this one is going to be worse because it is a civilian regime. No one is going to pressure them with economic sanctions to do the right thing. Nigerians will have to depend on themselves alone to fight to regain their free speech and other liberties. Another thing that should worry Nigerians is how they use technology to track individuals they consider enemies of the regime, like how they arrested Bristol in his hotel room. These are the kind of technology that they should deploy against terrorists and bandits, but they don't do that. Kidnappers have a field day everywhere in Nigeria. Most of the major highways today are unmotorable, not because of potholes and damaged highways, but because of constant kidnapping along major highways. The reason they focus on perceived enemies is because of loyalty to Tinubu instead of loyalty to Nigerian constitution. Take for instance the current National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu. He was once a presidential candidate under a party that Tinubu promoted. That party eventually merged into APC. Despite the fact that he has a police background, he was the former chairman of the EFCC, but his heavy political exposure and partisanship disqualifies him from the position of the NSA. This is very simple. He's an APC member. He sees anyone opposing the administration as an enemy. So he will do everything in his power to stop that person, whether the person is doing his job or not. And doing everything in his power might also mean doing it the legal way, throwing away the books. Even Tinubu himself doesn't respect Nigerian laws. Take the national anthem change, for instance. The law says that they must tell Nigerians, they must hold meetings so that Nigerians will formulate a new anthem. You don't just wake up one day and tell people, hey, you must stop singing an anthem they've been singing for more than 60 years. Just stop it and start singing the new one. So if you look at the speed with which they change the national anthem against the law, then you should understand that these people don't care about the laws. They do whatever they like. Even the presidential jet that they just bought, it wasn't in the budget. Up till today, they haven't told Nigerians how much it costs to acquire the presidential jet. They are running the show as a personal estate. It's only a private individual who spent his personal money that reserves the right not to reveal how much it cost him to acquire something. When you are spending public money, you must conduct due diligence. The law says that all procurements by the government must be authorized by the National Assembly before they embark on them. So it's ironical that their party has progressive in the name when all their policies are retrogressive. Look at all the petrol subsidy removal and naira flotation. It has diminished the purchasing power of Nigerians, so it can't be progressive in any way. Is it about the recent statement by the Minister of Education that anyone that is not up to 18 years will never be allowed to sit for WAEC or JAMB? So any smart student that is able to graduate from secondary school at the age of 16 will be expected to do what? Sit at home for 2 years and be doing nothing till he's 18 years? When in other countries they are celebrating students in their teens or maybe 20 years who already have their PhD. They should have made it 16 years instead of 18 years. Anyway, they always spend so much energy on negatives, on things that are retrogressive instead of being progressive. There is no way this party is a progressive party. Look at all their policies. It doesn't make any sense. Also, the recent statement by the IG of police about how Tinubu changed his life when he met him in the 90s, or was it when he was governor of Lagos? That kind of statement coming from the IGP already tells you where his loyalty lies. He will see anyone criticizing Tinubu as the enemy of state. They always confuse national security with the security of the president. It's not the same thing. There's a process to change the president if anything happens to him, or if his tenure ends, another election will be held. But if a national security issue affects Nigeria, take for instance there is serious violence that maybe reaches to a civil war and Nigeria disintegrates, it will be very hard to reintegrate Nigeria. But if something happens to the president, it's very easy to change the president, so the two are never the same. That's why they can detain anyone indefinitely, like the journalist who has been in detention for several weeks. They haven't charged him to court. This is illegal. They are doing it because they are in power. They feel no one can do anything to them. They pull all the strings today. But power is transient. Thanks for watching.